You paid for me, I know. But if you have any mercy in your heart, please let me go.
Everyone in town ignored the little girl standing there, until one mountain man paid $20 for her. But what she asked him later broke his heart forever. The mountain wind moved slowly through the tall dark pines and the old wooden cabin, stood alone on the edge of the valley where the world seemed quiet and forgotten. Caleb the mountain man had lived there for many years, with only silence and the distant sound of rivers as his company people in the nearby towns said he was a giant with a stone, heart a man who trusted no one and spoke to almost no one but those who truly knew. The mountains understood something different. They knew that a man who survives the mountains must have strength but also a soul that listens to the quiet things of the world. That afternoon, Caleb rode his old horse down the narrow trail toward a small dusty town at the bottom of the valley. He needed flour salt and a few tools. Winter would come soon, and the mountains showed no mercy to those who were not ready. The town was loud. Compared to the silence of the forest, wagons creaked, men argued over prices, and children ran through the streets, chasing each other through clouds of dust. Caleb tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside, his heavy boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. Most people moved slightly out of his way, not out of fear but respect, because everyone knew Caleb never caused trouble, but trouble never survived around him either as he paid for his supplies. He noticed something strange near the back of the store. A man with a thin, nervous face was whispering to travelers, showing them something hidden behind grates. At first, Caleb ignored it, but then he heard a small voice, barely louder than the wind, a voice that did not belong in that dark corner. Curiosity slowly pulled his eyes toward the back, and there he saw her, a small girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Thin, tired eyes, dirt on her cheeks, and clothes too big for her shoulders. She stood silently beside the nervous man, like a shadow that had forgotten how to move. Caleb felt something deep inside his chest tighten, a feeling he had not felt in many years. The man was telling strangers that the girl could work, clean, cook, carry water, anything for $20. Just $20, a quick, cheap deal. Like trading an old tool or a broken mule. Most people looked away, some laughed, some walked past like it was none of their concern. But Caleb stood still, his large hands gripping the cloth bag of supplies. The girl did not beg. She did not cry. She simply watched the floor like someone who had already learned that hope was a dangerous thing. After a long moment, Caleb slowly walked toward them. The nervous man noticed him and forced a crooked smile, saying, "Strong girl works hard, only $20, mountain man. Good deal." Caleb did not answer immediately. He knelt down slightly so his eyes could meet the girl's eyes, and for a moment the noise of the store disappeared. He saw fear there, but also something else, something quiet and stubborn, like a tiny flame refusing to die. Caleb stood again, reached into his coat and placed $20 on the crate. The nervous man quickly grabbed the money without another word and disappeared out the back door like a rat escaping daylight. The girl remained standing there, confused, silent, unsure what had just happened. Caleb looked at her for a moment and then simply said, "Come on, kid, we are leaving." The girl hesitated, like someone waiting for a trick, but eventually she followed him outside, where the cold mountain air felt cleaner than the dark store. Caleb lifted her gently onto the horse and climbed behind her, guiding the animal toward the long road back to the mountains. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The trail climbed slowly through forests and rocky hills as the sun began to fall behind distant peaks. The girl held tightly to the saddle, still unsure of the strange, quiet man who had just changed the direction of her life. Caleb finally spoke, his deep voice calm and steady. "You got a name?" The girl looked forward at the fading trail and answered softly, "Lily." Caleb nodded once, as if confirming something important. "Well, Lily, those mountains up there are my home." He paused for a moment, searching for words he rarely used. "You will be safe there." The girl stayed silent again, but after a while she asked something So unexpected that Caleb felt his heart twist like a rope pulled too tight. She asked, "If I work hard, can I stay? Or will you sell me again someday?" The words hit him harder than any storm he had ever faced. Caleb had fought winter wolves, hunger, and loneliness. But that small question carried a pain deeper than all of them. He tightened his grip. On the reins, his voice rough but gentle. "No, kid, nobody is selling you ever again." The wind carried his words into the trees as the horse continued climbing the trail toward the lonely cabin on the mountain. And for the first time in many years, Caleb felt the quiet walls around his heart begin to crack, because the mountains could teach a man how to survive, but sometimes a single small voice could remind him what it meant to care. The mountain morning arrived slowly, with pale sunlight sliding over the tall, silent peaks and the old cabin standing quietly between the pine trees. Caleb woke before the sun, as he always did, the cold air moving through the wooden walls. While the forest breathed in long, calm whispers for many years, his mornings had been the same: quiet fire, quiet coffee, quiet work. But this morning there was another small sound. In the cabin, the slow, careful movement of someone who was afraid to disturb anything. Caleb stepped outside to split wood, and when he returned, he saw Lily sitting near the small window, holding a tin cup with both hands like it was something precious. She looked around the cabin with wide, careful eyes, as if every object was something she had never been allowed to touch before. Caleb placed more wood in the stove, and the warm orange light filled the room. Lily watched him silently, like a small animal unsure if the place was truly safe or just another stop before life became hard again. Caleb spoke in his usual calm voice. "There is bread on the table. Eat as much as you want." The girl hesitated at first, but hunger slowly defeated her fear, and she began to eat slowly, carefully, like someone trained not to take two. Much the mountains outside were quiet, but inside the cabin something had changed, something new and fragile, like the beginning of spring after a long winter. As the hours passed, Caleb showed her simple things: where the water bucket stayed, where the blankets were, how to stay warm when the wind grew angry. Lily listened closely, never interrupting, always watching his face to see if she was doing something wrong. But Caleb never raised his voice, never demanded anything. He simply lived the same way he always had, except now the silence had a second heartbeat. By afternoon, the clouds began gathering over the mountains, and cold wind moved. Through the trees, Caleb stepped outside to secure the stable door, and when he returned, Lily was standing near the old wooden shelf where a few worn photographs rested. They were faded images from a life Caleb rarely allowed himself to remember. One picture showed a woman with gentle eyes. Another showed a small child wrapped in blankets, standing beside a younger Caleb in front of the same cabin. Lily stared at the photo quietly, and when Caleb walked closer, she asked, in a soft voice, "Who are they?" The question made the room feel colder for a moment. Caleb looked at the picture, his large hands resting on the wooden table. "That is my wife," he said slowly, "and that little one is my daughter." Lily looked again at the photograph, studying the smiling faces frozen in time. "Where are they now?" she asked. The mountain wind outside seemed to grow louder as Caleb answered. "They were taken by the winter fever many years ago. After that, the cabin became quiet." Again, Lily lowered her eyes, understanding more than most children her age, because pain often teaches lessons faster than time. The evening grew darker, and snow began falling gently outside the windows. Caleb cooked a simple stew, and the warm smell filled the cabin. Lily sat at the table watching the snow like it was something magical, something she had never been able to enjoy before. They ate together quietly, and for the first time Lily spoke without fear. She told him about the long roads she had walked, about the strangers who treated her like a burden, about nights spent sleeping behind buildings or under broken wagons. Caleb listened without interrupting, his face hard, but his eyes heavy with something deeper than anger. The storm outside grew stronger, and the cabin fire burned brighter as the night settled around the mountain. Then after a long silence, Lily looked at Caleb with the same careful expression she had worn since the first moment he found her, and she asked the question that slowly broke through the walls Caleb had built around his heart for years. She asked, "Why did you spend $20 on me?" The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a child who had never been chosen for kindness. Caleb sat still for a long moment, staring into the fire before answering. "Because you needed someone, and I had the money." Lily nodded slowly, but her small hands tightened around the cup, and then she asked, the question that truly shattered the quiet strength of the mountain man, "If I stay here, will you teach me how to be a daughter?" The words were so gentle, so uncertain, that for a moment the fire seemed to stop moving. Caleb felt something rise inside his chest, something he had buried deep under years of loneliness and grief. He had survived storms that crushed trees, he had faced wolves in the dark and winters that froze rivers solid, but nothing had ever struck his heart like the fragile hope inside that small voice. Lily quickly looked down, like she had said something wrong, like she expected the answer to be no, because life had taught her that kindness rarely stayed. Caleb stood slowly, the wooden floor creaking beneath his heavy boots. He walked toward the window, looking out at the snow-covered forest. The mountains stretched endlessly into the night, the same mountains that had watched him lose everything, the same mountains that had kept him alive when he believed life had nothing left to give. For many years, Caleb believed the mountains were all he needed: silence, strength, survival. But now a small girl sat at his table asking for something far more difficult than survival. She was asking for belonging. Caleb turned back toward her, and for the first time since his family was lost, the mountain man felt tears rise in his eyes, slow, quiet tears that surprised even him. Lily looked up, frightened, thinking she'd made him angry, but Caleb knelt beside her, placing a large, rough hand gently on her shoulder, his voice low but steady. "Lily, you don't have to learn how to be a daughter." He paused, struggling to keep his voice.
"Strong you already are." The wind outside carried snow across the valley while the
cabin remained warm and still. Lily did not say anything. At first she simply stepped forward, wrapping her small arms around the giant mountain man, and for the first time in many years Caleb held someone close again. The mountains remained the same, tall, silent and powerful, but inside the old cabin something had changed forever. Because sometimes the strongest hearts are not broken by storms or battles. Sometimes they are broken by a small voice asking if it is finally allowed to belong.